When was the first time you remember listening to metal music?
I think it must have been around 82, 81. I was 4 years old and I was listening to an AC/DC tape of my brother. It was a tape that had If You Want Blood, You've Got It on one side and Back in Black on the other side. And it was a 60 minutes tape only, so it was only a couple of those songs of each album on that tape. And while my brother wasn't really an AC/DC fan, or a rock fan per se, even at age 4, the music spoke to me, even though I didn't know what those guys were singing about. The music, it was such a primal energy, such a primal atmosphere, so powerful. And I immediately clicked with the music. And ever since, I was captured by the love and spirit of heavy metal and hard rock.
From just a metal fan to a musician, what made you start making music?
I guess I wanted to be a performer after I had listened over and over to the AC/DC album Alive 2. I felt it must be amazing to be on a stage and to be playing in such a great stage setting and to entertain people. I was always very vocal about everything as a kid. I wanted to be an entertainer. I was entertaining as a kid and I wanted to be on a stage. And I think when I first heard Eagle Fly Free by Halloween, that's when I really wanted to be a singer and play that and sing that type of music because it was powerful, it was uplifting, it was positive, and Michael Kiske was absolutely fantastic. It was a great way of showing how you can play aggressive and powerful music with a positive vibe and amazing vocals.
And so what made you become a vocalist?
I mean, I wanted to be a singer ever since I heard Paul Stanley sing in Kiss. My voice was, back then, of course, the voice of a child, of a teenager. And I didn't sound exactly like Paul Stanley, but that seemed reasonable to me to sing like Paul Stanley. And then I think when I first heard Halloween's Eagle Fly Free for the first time, I knew that was my cup of tea. And then, of course, Bruce Dickinson and all these singers. I really liked the idea of doing something very powerful but uplifting. Sing on guitar-driven music, but make it sound so easy and so powerful and with such a class and such a force.
What vocalists and bands were your references when you started singing?
Paul Stanley. I also love Bon Scott for lyrical reasons also. Michael Kiske, Ronnie James Dio, and then later on I appreciated the singers that were not just singing high. When you're a young singer, all you want to do is have an amazing range and you're just working to increase and expand your range. But I at some point, wanted to learn more about singing, about actually getting more feeling into singing and into the voice. And that's when I've always had a weak spot for soul-driven singers, I would say like Lou Gramm or Steve Perry or those kinds of singers. And I think later on they were a major influence to me from the start. But later on I appreciated that side of singing even more than in the beginning when I just wanted to sound like Jeff Tate, Bruce Dickinson, Ian Gillan, Michael Kiske, Paul Stanley. Yeah, that was what I wanted to do in the beginning. And then later on I fell in love with the likes of David Coverdale and Lou Gramm, Steve Perry.
How long did it take to find the correct technique to sing?
I have no idea. I'm still trying to figure out what the right technique to sing is. I had vocal lessons, and I remember the first tours I did were really demanding because I was constantly afraid. That's what every singer is about, being afraid. And I figured out I had a vocal teacher. I had several vocal teachers. And of course, they give you some tools that you can use when you're in trouble. They tell you how to stand and how to move and what to do with your voice. And they try to give you an idea what your voice looks like. And you have to imagine you have to sing the tone here and expand it to there and anything going on in your throat. And it drove me seasick, They don't know shit about going on a tour and being on a tour bus, having a flu, running around singing under very challenging audio conditions in smoky rooms back in the day. So I had to figure out myself. I think today I've come to a point where I say, in the studio you may even hurt yourself a little, but when you go on tour, anything that doesn't hurt and sounds good is good. But I appreciate what I had to learn as a singer is that you cannot be 100% every night. You're a human being and the voice is an extension of your personality. And It helps you express yourself. And sometimes you will struggle. And if you struggle honestly. Because it's the beauty of a live show is that people struggle honestly. And when you go down with flying colors and make it entertaining and make it feel and look and sound honest. And that's what I do. I know about, going down with flying colors and looking good while going down.
What kind of vocal experience was it like recording your first songs in the studio?
It was February 1994. We were recording a demo with Edguy. The first demo. And it was the first time I was in a quotation marks professional studio. I don't know how professional it was, but it was the first time I was in a studio. And it was a bit... my voice didn't sound good. I wanted to sound like one of those singers that I admired, but my voice was different. Most of those singers I admired had left puberty behind and had the voice of an adult, which I didn't have. I sounded like somebody whose voice was just in that transition, and that decreased the range, and it didn't sound really good. And I wish there would have been somebody like Lou Gramm or Bruce Dickinson or Jeff Tate who would lend me his voice. So I just did it, and I got away with it, and, people who liked me personally said, oh, it sounds good, even though they must have bitten their tongue. It didn't sound exactly good, but it was the start, and I knew what I had to work on, and it was great. Hey, I had my first professional recording at age 16. That was an experience back then. You had to book a studio, you had to have tape machines. There was no thing such as a home studio, or where everybody could record their stuff. We didn't know what to do. There was no talent show to queue up for and sing a Taylor Swift song in order to get a record deal. Everything was so different. Everything was so handmade, and everything was try and error, and I don't want to miss that time.
What kind of memories do you have when it comes to the first tour you ever did? How was it for your voice?
The first tour was an absolute nightmare, and not because the voice didn't stand it. I mean, the voice kind of lasted. It was not too bad. But as a young singer, you're constantly afraid for your voice. I mean, you wake up in the morning and you go, you check, is it there? Will I make it through the show tonight? And then you do 7 in a row, which we did on the first tour, which was a nightmare. Yeah, I was constantly miserable. And then you run around like Beaker all day, not talking, because you got to try to save the voice and try to rest the voice. You run around like Beaker and you do every night and every day, all day long. And then you bump into your first fans, because that's when we were making first fans. And they were waiting in front of the van. It was a van, not a bus even. Our mobile home, and I left it, and there were some fans. And, hey, Toby, can we? And I thought I was a loony. So, it was not exactly a pleasure cruise, but it makes you stronger, and I learned a lot on that tour. Eventually, I stopped worrying too much, because worrying doesn't make the voice stronger necessarily.
In the early days of Edguy, you were a very energetic performer.
What do you mean I was a very energetic performer?
Running and jumping around while singing songs that demanded a lot of your voice. What was your process of finding a healthy balance between your stage presence and performing vocally at the same time?
I just did it. It was my heroes, Bruce Dickinson and the likes, Paul Stanley, David Lee Roth. All these guys were running around and entertaining an audience. And as David Lee Roth put it, he used his arms and waving and jumping as an expansion of his eyebrows. Because when you're playing in an arena, which we didn't do back then, we played theaters and clubs. When you do that and you want to have an impact on the audience, you gotta talk to them. You gotta use your face. You gotta raise your eyebrow. But when you raise your eyebrow, nobody's gonna take note of it and notice. That's when I raised my legs and my arms and just tried to put some energy into the show. I think I went a bit over the top, and I think it doesn't really. It was young, and it was wild, and it was furious, and I like it. That impact, but I think, what we do with Avantasia, which is energetic, but it's got some more relaxed feeling in the show. It's more theatrical. I like that more. But, running around and having to sing at the same time, it's a very big challenge, and oftentimes my voice suffered from it. Oftentimes, you just run out of breath, and when you run out of breath, there's no way you can support your voice. You don't have the stamina, you don't have the pressure. And that's when you try to do harm to your voice, because that's when you don't sing the right way anymore. You know, you're not supporting your voice with your whole upper body anymore. You're just going and that's when you get hoarse. So it wasn't always easy, but I didn't always care. I just did it and thought, you know, if we get through this and we get some good reviews and people say, oh, he sung shit, but some of his jokes were actually funny, I was happy.
Regarding the lyrics, Edguy had serious and fun songs about different themes, while Avantasia most of the time always had a story connect to each album. Who were the main artists that influenced your way of writing?
I've been influenced by so many songwriters. Tony Clarkin of Magnum, God rest his soul, he's been a very, very amazing songwriter. And there was no effect writing coming from Tony. It was not pretentious, it was just honest work, no gimmicks, just honest work, great crafter of lyrics. But also I've always been inspired. The first songs I wrote were clearly inspired by Paul Stanley and Kiss, because that was the music that I felt closely connected to when I started out in a band. I stole from early Kiss songs and turned them into early Edguy songs. But those songs never made it on a record or anywhere. But it was just my school of writing. And then, of course, you know, Halloween and Iron Maiden and whatever we stole from. Dio, I still, to this day, I'm highly influenced by Dio. Jim Steinman, fantastic writer. So I think anything you hear and that makes an impression on you and that leaves a mark on you and that gets under your skin will subconsciously affect your way of writing and your way of creating art. And that's why I don't think I have a specific idol or go-to writer that I try to mimic or you know, be influenced by. I think it's the whole thing is a sum of many different influences.
You released many albums in your career. Are there any albums you can point to where you see yourself making big steps as a vocalist?
I would say, I think, of course, Vainglory Opera was the first album that sounded somehow professional. I think my voice sounded quite good there, even though I sometimes sounded a bit like a dwarf on steroids, or a Smurf. I sound a bit like a Smurf. It's got a very strange sound, the recording. It's a very high-endish recording, a lot of treble. And also my vibrato was a little bit out of control. It was like, vibrato? Is it vibrato? Vibrato? Vibrator? I don't know. Anyway, it was out of control, and my voice was just going real quick. And I later on got better control over my voice, but it was getting even more out of hand because I knew how to use my voice with these this classical kind of up and down, those wavy things. And I made use of it to a terrible extent on albums like Savage Poetry. But eventually I think there is a time when a young singer is when everything is about range. Everything is about increasing your range and doing all these stunts that will make people's jaws drop, mostly other singers, because nobody else cares, and especially a lot of women don't like that kind of singing and say, oh, it's annoying. Please sing in a proper way, but don't yell at me. That's what I figured out, at least. So at some point, I think it was not about extending my range anymore or expanding my range. At some point, it was only about putting more feeling into it, and it was about the details. And I think there was a changing point when I had a studio built by a professional company, and all of a sudden I could record every day. I could work with my voice and could see what my voice does, under which circumstances, and what tiny switch I had to operate so something different would come out. And all of a sudden it was all about micro timing. Many singers don't really care about timing. It's very, very, very important. So all of a sudden I was caring about that micro timing and the micro tuning and about the feeling and where to give a little more pressure, where to give less pressure. And I think you can hear that, or I can hear that I made a big step for the Moonglow album. And Ever After, Ghost in the Moon, and also Heart, a bonus track on the Moonglow album. I think I did vocal things there that I was not able to do 5 years earlier. And I think that's when I made a real big step. And it was, as I said, very important and very underrated is the timing of singing. It's all about timing as much as about tuning. It's just, don't have a terrible timing. It won't sound good. You won't have feeling when you have bad timing. Doesn't only go for singing.
Since Avantasia started, you have recorded and performed live with many different artists, and many of them are still references for you. What is the best advice you have learned from them?
I never got any advice. I got one. I mean, I learned from everybody of them when you sing next to them. My whole career has been one giant vocal lesson, and some of the singers I just listen to and I think like, how the fuck are they doing it? People like Jorn Lande or Eric Martin or that just have a different voice. You can learn a lot from those singers because especially Eric's soulful approach. He's got so much soul in there, and you listen, how does he do it? And you can take a thing or two away from it, but I'll never have a voice like him. We have very different voices. Now with Jeff Tate or Michael Kiske, but Jeff Tate especially, everything he does is so smooth, and it's such a healthy way of singing, such an economic way of singing, and our voices are very, very similar. Not our speaking voices. His speaking voice is way lower. It's an octave lower than mine. He sounds like almost like a special effect when he talks to you. It's like somebody tuned it down. But singing-wise, we're in the same range, and he's got an absolutely perfect way of singing, technically flawless, and you can learn a lot from it. And really funny is also when we did when we prepared for the Moonglow tour, and we were rehearsing the song Alchemy and Invincible, 2 songs I had sung with Jeff on the album. And Jeff was asking me, which part am I going to sing? And I told him, okay, we do it as we did it on the album. And he listened to the album and he said, can you send me the notes, the lyrics, and make little notes, which part I sang on the record, which part you sang? And he couldn't really. And I understand it because, you get some reverb on, you get the music playing. It's not just the voice, it's within the music. And it was really hard for him to distinguish his parts from my parts. Our voices are very, very similar, even though he will always be the original. So I don't take credit where there's no credit due. Jeff, I love you.
Is there anything new that you tried vocally on the new Avantasia album, Here Be Dragons?
I think I may have. I mean, I sang and I always sing and I just sing the way I want to sing. Maybe on the title track, Here Be Dragons. Here Be Dragons has a very special mid part. It's a bit like I had to push a little bit and make it sound a little distorted. And it was extremely high. There's a very, very extremely high mid part. Sometimes you don't really know where it's going to take you. But for some reason, I thought of Sammy Hagar. And thought like, what would Sammy Hagar do? And I have no idea what Sammy Hagar would do really. But I just tried to, okay, let's get a bit of Sammy Hagar's mojo and his good thoughts flying over to you into the studio. And let's just try and pretend you're Sammy Hagar. And that helped me to push it up there and still control the voice. For some reason, I was in the right mindset when I envisioned it being a Sammy Hagar song. So apart from that, Against the Wind, there is the chorus. But it's not so much about the voice, about the range. It's about the vocals in the chorus are different to what most heavy metal bands or power metal quotation marks bands would do. It's high, it's demanding. That's nothing unusual in power metal. But it has a very, very different timing. The phrasing and the timing is very different. It's almost got this soulful, I don't want to say a shuffle touch, but it's got a very loose, it's flying over the song. It's not spot on power on the straight notes and the straight bars. No, it's loosely flying over it with a feeling that I often hear in Steve Perry's kind of singing or way of singing. And that was very, very demanding. It's much more difficult than people would think. And I'm so proud I could pull it off. And I'm also very, very thankful I found another singer who could be a duet partner of mine who could pull it off as well, which is Kenny Lacremont of Heat. Amazing singer, and he was the right voice for me as a guest because he's got both those sides. He understands the both extremes. He can sing really high, very technically flawless, and also he's got that easygoing AOR, Steve Perry, Motown approach. At least he understands that type of music. At least I guess he likes Steve Perry. Because if you are an AOR singer and you don't like Steve Perry, fuck you. I'm sorry, Kenny, I don't know if you like Steve Perry or not. I didn't say fuck you to you.
Do you have a warm-up routine before the show?
Not really. I try to speak a lot before the show. When my voice is tired, I try to get the body the blood pressure up a little bit and the heartbeat up a little bit, and I just try to move and get the whole body warmed up and talk. Because talking, if you naturally talk just like this and very healthy, very unforced, and sometimes you will do you do these kinds of things just to warm up the voice without stressing it out. And then, I do the rest of the warm-up during the first couple of songs, because we play 2.5, 3 hours, and if I warm up for 3 hours and blow out half of my voice before the show, it will not last until the end of the show. So I have to carefully warm up. And also I think part of the warm-up routine is not to worry too much. There are singers who warm up hours before the show, and they're so worried, it hurts to be even around them, because they will affect you. You will start worrying again. Most of us singers are nervous wrecks. Not in Avantasia, I have to say, fortunately, but many singers I've met throughout my career are just afraid of not delivering it. And that's not good. You shouldn't be afraid of not delivering it. You should go out and kill, as Joey DeMaio would say.
Are there any foods or drinks that you would like to avoid before the show that you feel affect your voice in some way?
Anything with acid, anything with grease, anything with salt. Too much salt. I mean, you can't have French fries 3 hours before a show. I can't do it. Because when you run and I don't want to throw up on stage, and it kind of makes me lazy. It makes me feel tired, and it also affects your voice, and nothing that makes it too thirsty. No salt, no heavy spices, no grease, no milk. But, if you do it, you can play the show nevertheless. It's just what's better for you. I try to avoid it, but sometimes you haven't been given food. I can't eat anything but a banana or a piece of dry cake or dry bread before maybe 3 hours before the show. I can eat a banana before I go on stage, but I cannot have a meal 3 hours before I go on stage. If I know I have show at 8 o'clock, I gotta find something to eat at approximately 3 o'clock. And 3 o'clock. And it's gotta be really, really in favor. It's gotta work in favor of the show. So I can't eat anything. I couldn't have a pizza.
What was the reaction when your parents realized you were singing in a metal band?
They found out the first moment I joined a heavy metal band, because I was 14 years old. I didn't join it. We founded the heavy metal band. We started it. And it was called Edguy. They didn't know it was heavy metal. We thought it was hard rock because we didn't know what we would play. I mean, our drummer had never played drums, so we didn't know what he would play, what he would come up with. So I guess it was more hard rock. But they were fine with it, absolutely. They thought, let the boy do whatever he wants to do. They were always very supportive, and I'm very, very grateful for that. I'm not sure they really liked everything I've done musically, but they come to, my father isn't alive anymore. He always came to our shows when we were playing in our hometown, and my mother still does. And yeah, I really think they didn't have a big problem with me playing heavy metal. I mean, they knew I wasn't eating children and doing drugs, so they were cool with it.
Would you like to say something to a young metal vocalist who is starting their journey?
Do whatever you like, as long as it sounds good and it doesn't do harm to your voice. If it doesn't hurt and it sounds good, it probably is the best technique there is. So don't worry too much and enjoy what you do. Because if you don't enjoy what you do, you will not have the endurance to do it forever or for a long time. So that's all I want to say. And don't let your bandmates make the set list. Make it yourself. There will always be an asshole who will say, "Oh, we got to play Child in Time twice tonight," and then you should go like, "Okay, I think we should do Sting of Flight of the Bumblebee, at double speed twice tonight when you already have blisters." It's really, make sure you make the set list. You determine where your boundaries are, where your limits are, and then everything is fine. As long as it doesn't hurt and sounds good, it is good.